you've had STEM on your computer for several years, so I'm going to assume you know some of the basics. So I'm going to
Yes,
assume
yes.
you know what this toolbar is for, and that you know how to create an element. So I'm going to create my first service, and I'm going to assume also that you're fairly familiar with the concept of the service representing your customers or your subscribers, and also characterizing how much those customers use a service. And then in due course, that a resource corresponds to something which costs some money, which is required to deliver the service, and that a location represents the geographical scope. We'll get to those. Let's start with the service. So I'm going to open up the demand dialog. And again, I'm assuming you're familiar with these icons and the menus.
Yes, yes, to some extent.
Yeah, all right. So basically, a service has, so basically every different element type has the same things at the bottom of the menu. These are sort of common functions. Yeah. The first part of the menu is specific to which type of element it is. So for a service has demand assumptions, tariff assumptions, and assumptions about which resources are required. We're going to start with the demand. And this is, unfortunately, this is actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest, element dialogue in the system, and it's unfortunate this is the first one you have to get your head around. In a simple model, you only need the first part. So if what you're doing is only driven by the number of customers, then actually you can get away with just the first three fields. So in this particular case, I'm going to type in customers as what our connection unit is, because we're thinking of them as discrete customers. And the numbers I've given myself are that I have a target market of 1,000 potential customers. So I'm going to put that in for the customer base. And then I'm assuming that my business plan aims to get to a 2% penetration in year one and 15% in year two. And okay, since you've been using STEM for a while, I'll give you the slightly more technical version of this. So when it says in year one, technically that means by the end of year one. And when it says year two, again, technically that means by the end of year two. Right. And it doesn't say so, but I'm going to use an S-curve to represent this penetration. So I can get to that in several ways. The easiest way is if I right-click the penetration field, I get this little menu and I can do change type, and I can say I want this to be an S-curve. And conceptually, the S-curve is a sub-dialog that lives beneath the penetration field. It is the parameters that constitute the penetration. And I'm going to say that my saturation, meaning the long-term asymptote for the S-curve, will be 1, i.e. 100%.
All right.
The base period basically means at what point in time does this tend to 0? And I'll say I want it to be 0 in the beginning, at year 0, end of year 0. And then it's spelled out that in year 1, I want this to have a value of 2%, 0.02. And in year 2, I want this to have a value of 15%. And very conveniently in the editor, there is a graph button that allows you to just preview what these parameters look like. So this is basically an S-curve where the base period, year 0, here is where it tends to 0. Saturation of 1 is the long-term asymptote that it tends towards. And then it's calibrated with 2% in year 1 and 15% in year 2. And basically there is a standard logistic formula which STEM uses to generate this curve, and it only has a certain number of degrees of freedom, and those parameters are enough to tie it down.